Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Health of Business Leaders. So today I'm joined by Darren Kanthal, and in his own words, he helps leaders to get their shit together. So what I normally do is hand over to the person that I'm chatting to and let them kind of introduce themselves a bit better than I would do. So do you want to introduce us to what you do, a little bit more about you, Darren? That'd be great.
All right. Well, lucky number 13, right? That's great. I like that. So by job title, I'm an executive coach or a career coach, depending on how you want to look at it. I grew up in corporate America as a human resources guy. So I spent a lot of time in hiring, termination, professional development, conflict resolution, all that kind of good stuff. And left corporate America in 2018. Started my business for all intents and purposes, January 1 of 2019. And yeah, I help people get their shit together. So what does that mean? You know, for the mid and senior level leader, they're more lonely than you might think. They are plagued with the same sort of internal narrative or self-talk that we all have. I'm not good enough. People are going to think I'm full of shit. I'm going to screw it up. People aren't going to like me. They're going to laugh, whatever, ridicule, all the things. So a lot of what I coach to is, in essence, how do we shut our brains up to stop telling us all the ways we're going to screw stuff up and then really lean into, you know, our confidence and what we're great at. And on the flip side, for the job seeker, it's a little more linear, right? It's how to produce a great resume, how to go find the job you want, how to figure out what you want to be in life. So it's a little more linear on the career side and a little more, I call it meandering. It's not meant to be an aimless meander, but it's not so linear. We got to like play around and move about and do some things.
Yeah. So quick question then, because it sprung to mind. What part of what you do you enjoy the most?
Oh, man. Well,
you're on the spot now.
There's a bunch of stuff. I mean, the first thing is I really don't do well working for other people. So selfishly, I really enjoy being my own boss. Like there's something really good about that for me. On the service side of things, what's really interesting is, of course, I know my upbringing, right? Both as a child and into early adulthood and all the things. So sometimes I'm surprised that my clients let me into these vulnerable places with them, because sometimes I refer back to the 25-year-old in me, but I'm not 25, I'm 48. And so the other thing I love is that my clients really bring me into their lives. Like there's a lot of trust and vulnerability, and you know it through your work and also as a human, right? Like it takes some really deep trust to get vulnerable with people. And it's remarkable that I'm invited in, I can hold the confidence. And what I tell people often is that if we remove our judgments and our egos and we both show up as 50-50 partners, and really all we're trying to do is brainstorm and resolve whatever your challenge is, like we've got two great minds working on the same thing without trying to prove to each other how smart we are or that I'm right and you're wrong or none of that stuff. And so that is just like that in and of itself is the beauty of what I do.
Okay. It's really interesting because, you know, I'll be completely frank with you. It's a bit of a new world to me with the kind of work you do, right? Which is not a bad thing. It's just an unknown thing for me. So, you know, from your perspective then, and this is asking your insight because you deal with these people all the time, right? So if you've got, you know, imagine a senior executive within a big company, you know, 1,000 employees, and they're doing their thing, lots of stress, you know, lots of kind of responsibility on their shoulders. You come in as the person that comes and helps them, you know, with that situation, how to deal with it, right? Is there anything that's in place from I'm generalizing, but do companies put on this kind of support for the executives in general, or is it just something that's not really done, or how does that work?
It's done a lot, actually. Let me rephrase what it is. When I say it is done a lot, it being the corporation, the company will hire me or partner with me to coach the executives, right, senior leaders, mid leaders.
Right.
Now, sometimes, you know, if you're the CEO and you believe in professional development and you think coaching is a part of that professional development, you might be hiring me to coach you, but you're also hiring me sometimes to coach others in the company. right? So to answer the question directly, yes, lots of companies hire me and other people like me to coach their senior and mid and executive leaders. And really the point is that this is what I've learned. If you feel more confident in who you are and the way you show up, and that you have the tools and the capabilities to solve the problems of your work and your life, there's less conversation, right? And the conversation I'm talking about is self-doubt, second guessing, judgmental conversation. Some people, I do this a lot, beat themselves up. Like, you suck. What's wrong with you? Why would you do that? Why did you say that? You sound like an idiot. A lot of us have those types of voices. So if we can quiet that stuff, then our ego is chill to me. It's a little more neutralized. And it's kind of like picking your head above the clouds, or like being in a helicopter and looking down on the forest. You could see a lot more. And the seeing in this analogy for leaders is being creative, brainstorming without judgment, allowing trial and error to unfold, even letting certain employees, quote unquote, fail. Like, let them fuck it up and let them learn in the same way that parents let their children, not burn themselves, but feel that heat of the hot stove, right? Like, so there's a lot of reducing the mental chatter, figuring out what's important, how am I going to go approach it? And then from the corporation side is, if we have leaders that are more confident and performing better, the company does better.
Yeah, which is obviously the bottom line, right? Which is what it kind of comes back to. So what's really interesting there is you kind of spoke about, getting into people's lives, being trusted, being that kind of advisor. When it comes to, when you go through that coaching process with your clients, obviously there's a process to it, right? But do you find that they will actually talk to you about specific live situations that are going on and kind of get your take on it, and that kind of helping to get through it?
Yes. My coaching is often focused on something related to your career. And, there's the old adage that I think precedes us, right? I think it's like a baby boomer or earlier time of work, which is, check your emotions at the door.
Yeah.
Or, the idea of separation of church and state, meaning like, don't bring your personal problems to work. That's your personal stuff.
Yeah.
I don't fully believe that. I think to an extent, yes, but generally speaking and I know you well enough to know that you're a husband and a father and a business owner and a coach, right? So, and a son, right? Maybe you're a sibling. I don't know. Are you a sibling?
Got a sister, yeah.
Okay. So just right there, those are 6 different roles.
Yeah.
Right? Now, at every given time, no matter what you're doing, you are always those 6 things, right? So if we're telling you to forget your sister, your wife, your kids, because all I want you to do is focus on work, like, how do you do that? Like, what if you're fighting with your spouse? Or what if your parents have something going on and you and your sister are commiserating, collaborating? Like, how do you just check that at the door? It's bullshit. So what I always tell people is, you are you through and through, right? You are all these roles. And if any part of you, any role is in turmoil or in disarray or something, and it's important for us to talk about it, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Just to further the point real quick is, when I do my intake forms or in my intake meetings with my clients, I like to know, do you have a spouse? What's their name? Do you have kids? What their names? So this way we don't have to say my wife or my husband. We say Rachel, Bob, whatever, right? We say the name and it becomes more familiar, and I think it lowers some defenses.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting having a conversation with you, because obviously we do a similar kind of thing, but it's not from the executive coaching kind of end. It's more health and performance and that kind of thing. So I know there's a lot of kind of interaction between what we both do as companies, right? I think it'd be great to get your insight into, because I had a conversation a little earlier with a CEO, and I kind of got his take on, cultural changes around him getting in shape and whether that had an impact, etc. So again, I know it's very difficult to generalize, and I kind of understand, there's data out there that shows when the CEO is fit, that it does have a positive impact on the business. We kind of know that, right? But from your experience of doing this for a long time and working with different types of people and different types of companies, what is your kind of experience with, executive teams that have a kind of healthy culture, they're generally kind of working out and training and they're eating better foods, compared to a company culture where you go in and you kind of think, wow, these guys are, drinking too much, they're not in good shape. Have you got kind of any comparisons, any insight you can give on that?
Yeah, I got a funny personal story. I'm going back to, oh man, do I even know the date? No, I don't. I can't tell you. 2008. It was like 2008. I was working in downtown Denver, and there was this like 5-page newspaper that was created daily. It was a freebie. It was like the Downtown Denver News or something. And the cover story said, "Fat is contagious."
Okay.
All right. Now, me and my buddy had a ball with this, because then we were like, "Hey, you're going to the bathroom, make sure you wash your hands. I don't want you to catch that contagion of fat down there." So we laughed and laughed and laughed. And reading the article, it was talking about corporate culture, which is how easy it is to celebrate. What are we in? February. Everybody who's got a February birthday, come to the lunchroom and have cake, right? Friday is bagels. Oh, Thursday, Cam's wife baked a bunch of cookies, so there's cookies in the break room. And the point is that, well, my point and their point is we like to share a meal with each other. It's something about breaking bread,
yeah,
right? Literally and figuratively. And then there's the influence of all my coworkers are collaborating or congregating and having this, molten chocolate cake. And of course I got to eat some. So there's something to say about the herd mentality or the mob mentality or critical mass. There's something about being left out or being in the crowd. So that's part of it. Second thing is, one of my favorite leadership models is called the Leadership Challenge. And it's got these 5 exemplary practices, I think they call them. And the first one is called Model the Way. And in the book, it goes to simple stuff like, if punctuality is important to you, then you're going to be on time all the time. And on the flip side is, if you say punctuality is important to you, but you're 10 minutes late to a meeting, like, is it really? So my point in sharing all that, and to your point, is yes, if I am an executive and part of the executive team, and we've made it a cultural thing or a human bond thing or whatever the thing is that we want to be a healthier organization, then yeah, I see that permeate, right? There's apples and grapes and oranges as opposed to M&Ms, I don't know, candy bars and crap, whatever, chips, right? I had a boss in my last corporate gig that we go to the gym together. And it was fun, right? Like, my boss is going to the gym and I'm going with her, and my colleague went too. And there were even times where we were all going to go, and then one of us had to bow out. And then, the story in my head was my boss, Cammie, had to bow out. She said, "Go have a great workout." So it was encouraged to be healthy, and that was part of the culture. So very long-winded answer to say, yes, I think it permeates down, right? We model the way. If we're healthy, then other people see that, and it's inspiring. I think we want to be more like that.
You've literally kind of resonated what I was talking about earlier. And the CEO gentleman that I spoke to was kind of one of his apprehensions about what I was saying was that it's difficult to get everyone to come on board with, a quote unquote healthy lifestyle, right? Because there's freedom of choice, people might not want to be healthy, etc. And kind of what we came to was the fact that the word you just used there is inspiration. Because if you start to inspire your team, because, let's be honest, if the boss is walking up the stairs and they're 20 minutes late and they're all out of breath and they're sweaty and all this kind of stuff, right? People see it. They see that person. They're like, this guy, girl is not really inspiring me to kind of change myself, right? So I think that thing you said around, inspiration, and what we've experienced as a company is we've kind of looked at different ways and tried different ways of creating healthier companies. And what we've seen in our experience is that when you start at the bottom, which is the lower level kind of staff members and workforce, it doesn't really have a big impact above. It kind of stays there and the uptake's not great. But when you go from the top and look after the CEO and then potentially the senior executive team as well, then suddenly 6 months, a year down the line, like you say, it's apples on the desk. It's okay, we're going to change our summer staff party from one big piss up, we call it over here, to actually we're going to go and do, an inflatable challenge thing, and we're going to do this kind of activity. So, we've seen the shift, and it's great to talk to people like yourself that are in that executive world. And it's like, actually, this is the kind of best approach is that inspiration model rather than you've got to do this. Because what we see, and again, you probably see this all the time, and we're talking more about the corporate space because we're starting to do a bit more of this now, is that a lot of companies will tick a box and go and get, I won't name names just in case, but they'll go and spend $50 per person per month on some crappy app that has a Mount Kilimanjaro, that they go and climb up. And we all know it's not going to help anyone, right? No one's going to really use it. So I think, the top-down approach, the more people we talk to that are in, your world, people actually CEOs, it seems to be the best approach. Have you seen that kind of yourself in the real world as well then?
What's coming up for me, Cam, is twofold. And I don't know if this is going to answer it. So if not, then bring me back. So, I worked out with your team. And so everybody listening knows I worked out with your team. And Craig was my trainer. The guy knows his stuff, right? And what was amazing for me was that even when I wasn't with him we worked out over Zoom, but physically together, as I was making choices throughout my day, there were times where like Craig was the Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder. In essence, right? Like, are you sure you want to keep eating those chips? Are you sure you want that 17th double stuffed Oreo? Aren't you good at 16? Right? Like, so he was in my head of the decision I was making. So so where I'm going with this is accountability, right? Yeah. There was an accountability I felt to Craig, not because I owed it to him, but because I owed it to myself and because he was my partner. And that's one of the best things about being a coach is I'm a natural accountability partner. It's not meant to be stressful, even though sometimes it is. But the point is like you have someone that cares about you, that is interested in your best interests, your well-being, all the stuff. And that connection, like it's not indescribable. It's just an invaluable connection. So I know that doesn't answer the question, I don't think. But I just want to highlight like that accountability to the coach and the program and your expertise. That's the other thing. Like Craig was the expert. If I ever had a question, like I defer to Craig. And he had the answer. He had the answer and a lot of words to go with it, right? A lot of explanation, but he knows his shit. So there's comfort in that too. Now, coming back to your initial question, I think, and again, keep me on target here if I'm off, which is, even using the analogy of the CEO walking upstairs 20-minute late, sweating, and maybe that's not an inspiration, except if he says, hey team, I'm trying to get in shape, so I'm using the stairs, right? Yes. And in 3 to 6 months, if he's a little trimmer, a little, his face has changed or her face, whatever, right? Like that is inspiring. And then I think, and then it starts to go downhill for me, not in a bad way, but like the snowball starts rolling. It makes me think about, and I know this is not your program, but in America, there's a lot of Weight Watchers groups, right? And so a lot of people come together, right? And there's that cohort. Yeah. And there's something to say about the science of a cohort, which maybe lends itself to the accountability of having a coach. Yeah. The other thing that was coming to mind to me is, if you're thinking about changing a culture from bottom up, like you're starting with the lowest levels that have influence sideways, but not really too far up. Yeah. And the top doesn't have a ton of sideways because there's not that many peers, but a lot of influence down. So it makes me wonder about the sandwich. Yeah. Right. If the lower level people were inspired or motivated and so were the top, like, does that start to then pinch the middle that are the late bloomers or the ones that don't even want to do it, but then they're looking up and down like, whoa, everybody's getting in shape. Maybe I should too.
I think a trend we've seen, and because we on a weekly basis, I probably talk to between 10 and 15, guys and girls that are very senior within companies. So you start to see patterns, right? And one of the patterns I've seen, over the last probably 2 years has been more and more of these kind of senior people talking about the young guns coming up. They're in their 30s, 35, 37, whatever, that are fit, strong, healthy, don't really drink, very career driven, and they're sitting there going, wow, this guy or girl, is coming up for my role. And what's stopping them coming up behind me? And we often get, these individuals that are 50 plus coming to us going, hey, I need to get in shape because, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm still doing the whole eating out event thing 3 times a week. I can't keep up with this. And as a board of governors or the chairman or CEO, you're going to see that. You're going to see that. So I think we've seen a cultural change, as in people are starting to get more aware, because either, like you say, people are coming up from the bottom that are really in shape, or people are kind of leveling themselves up within their careers and getting into interviews. And I've had this on good authority from a friend of mine based over in the UAE, and he does hiring and firing for big companies as well. And they're going up for these big interviews, and there's 5 people in the room, and 3 of them work out 4 times a week, are in amazing shape, and they don't. And it's a little bit like, right, well, if I haven't got the energy, I don't look good, I haven't got that kind of vibrancy which you get from people that work out and keep themselves in shape, it puts you at a bit of a disadvantage. So I think, within our industry, we're certainly seeing a change. And I know it very much varies from industry to industry, because, there's industries in London that I can comment on that are still back in the 1700s, the way they look at things. But I feel like, and hopefully you agree, and maybe you've got different insight, but I feel like the tide is just starting to change now with business and health and the importance of that. Is that an observation you've made? Or
it's interesting, as you're describing like the older experienced professional looking at the young gun, it's very primal, isn't it? Right, in the sense that like I'm the established lion, but now there's the new lion that's like gonna take over my herd, or whatever it's called, my pride.
Yeah,
right.
Sharpen my teeth quickly.
Yes, it's very primal.
Yeah.
I'm not as attuned to the health and nutrition stuff as you are. But I'll comment to this, which is, I was born in 1975. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And I feel like during that time, there was a lot of like sex, drugs, and rock and roll, a lot of pinup women from the male perspective. A lot of it was like physical appearance.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly when it changed. Maybe it was in the 2000s somewhere, where it seemed to be like some of the focus was going towards mental health, like actually taking vacations and unplugging. And then I think about today's world through the eyes of when I grew up in the 80s. And there's a lot of stuff today that, as I talk to people of my generation, like we don't totally get everything that's happening. We're willing to accept, but we don't totally get it. And where I'm going with this is the younger generation, or the younger generations, plural, seem to be significantly more open and accepting, right? It's more about connection and mental, emotional stuff, not so much how you look, but what kind of person are you? And I think that's a big shift that maybe lends itself more to what you're describing, in that we want to be healthy and look better, but I think it's more for maybe personal gratification, health, feeling tired, being able to get on the ground with my grandkids, being able to play with children and still have some youthfulness to ourselves, and less about being the pinup. And I think that's the shift that I'm seeing.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think it's, like you say, it's less about, you're always going to have, that's always going to exist in some people's worlds. But I think if you used to kind of make a general comment, yes, I would agree. It's more about people feeling good in themselves. It's about, being the most authentic version of themselves, which, we all know that it's a healthy, strong version of us, not the version that's scraping ourselves off of a pub floor at 2 a.m, right? So I think you're bang on with that. It's about, the kind of cultural change in general. And I've got young kids, right? And I can see those guys being inspired already, not so much the baby, but my eldest, being inspired by these kind of YouTube guys that are working out and they're playing football. And that to me is not a bad thing. I think, I'm a little younger than you. I'm kind of in between the two of us. But, I think the culture, when I was a kid, and maybe it was the same as you, there was a kind of cigarettes and vodka around the back of the bike sheds kind of thing. And I feel like the kids that are coming up now, done some training a couple of weeks ago with some 15, 16, 17-year-old football kids. And there's definitely a shift in their kind of age group as well around, I want to look and feel better, which is, in my opinion, is a great thing. So let's bring it back in a bit, because we can kind of talk about this forever. I want to talk a bit more about you, because you're an interesting guy. So when we first met, obviously you was on your own journey with your health and everything like that. So what I'd like to get from you, if it's cool, is to get your kind of key, the key shifts that you had on your health journey, and also maybe some tips that you found have been really helpful for someone that maybe, is struggling with time a little bit, doesn't know where to start. And I think if you could, that little sprinkle of expertise you've got within the executive world, because really people that watch this are generally, business people, that would be really interesting as well.
Yeah. My health journey is long. Going back to I don't even know, 2010, I learned I was lactose intolerant. So that's 13 years ago. And I grew up on, milk and chocolate milk and every crappy food in the world, it seemed. Then in 2013, I learned I was gluten intolerant. So, for all intents and purposes, 10 years, I have a rather narrower lane of food that I can't eat without having some issues. And along that time too, my weight has fluctuated. Like right after I learned I was gluten-free, I was the skinniest I've been as an adult, and that felt good. My brother was the only one to say this, but he said I look gaunt, which is not a word you want to be described as, or I didn't want to be described as, right? No. So there's something with that. Fast forward to current is, I'm not fat by any stretch of, I think, the eye's imagination, but according to BMI and some of these other measures, I am, which is interesting. More importantly for me is it felt like no matter what I did, if I took foods out, put foods in, drunk, didn't drink, exercised this many times per week or that many times, nothing seemed to change with my body. And it's frustrating. And by the way, I also live with a functional nutritionist, right? So some of the things I'm doing are not just YouTubing and Googling. I've got an expert in my house that knows her stuff equally as much as you and Craig do. And still, it didn't seem in my eyes anything was working, So it's not fair to say I tried everything, but I tried everything I tried up until I was like, all right, I need different type of help, which is what led me to you and Craig. So what did I learn from you guys? One was eating differently. A big part of your program, or Craig's, I know they're the same, so I get confused when I say you or Craig, but one and the same, was eating more vegetables. Haha, shocking. But more of the fact of eat them all day. I was having, a serving of steamed broccoli in the morning, which sounds so bizarre, but it was wonderful. It was really nice, right? So I'm having eggs and avocado and maybe even a piece of toast and broccoli or whatever vegetable that I was satiated for way longer. So that was nice, right? So having more vegetables, not having a salad for lunch, because that makes me want to punch people in the face. Having a salad for lunch does not do it for me.
No.
But having a side salad with lunch is no big deal. Having veggies at breakfast was no big deal. It was good. And I say no big deal. It was easy to implement. Two is, I had worked out the way I worked out, meaning, right, I'm going to do my bicep curls. I'm going to do my bench press. I'm going to do 3 sets of 10. Right. So the activities I were doing were super repetitive. And that was the other thing that Craig really kind of threw on its heels. Right. It was a different way of working out. I mean, I was exhausted from these workouts. Sometimes I was like, dude, man, I'm tired. I can barely lift my legs up. I'm so tired. Of course, he was encouraging, this is the reason we're doing it. Right. And so there was a different way of working out that I don't understand. And what I mean by that was the physiology of the body, different eccentric loads, higher weight, lower rep, lower weight, higher rep, mixing this in with that, all these things that I just don't know. 3 for me too was a surrender in a good way. And I think this might be valuable for some of the execs, which is, part of the exec mindset is I know. I'm the expert. I'm the top dog at my company. So no one knows better than I, except when it comes to health and nutrition. And if we want to debate the experts and tell them, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And to some extent I did this because I was annoyed with certain stuff, right? It's ridiculous. So there's a surrender to the process and the expertise and the knowledge that I'm investing in. And I mean investing from time, energy, effort, money, all the stuff, right? So instead of fighting the fact that I didn't like the low carb aspect of what I was doing, was to trust the process that I was still getting the calories and the carbs I needed from the additional vegetables I was having. And if I was still lethargic, yeah, go have a coconut water. Like there's things to incorporate as opposed to eating 12 pieces of bread or the stuff, you know? So there was that surrender of the process. And I think the last thing was recognizing like it doesn't happen overnight. It being the transformation or the change or the whatever we want to change, right?
Yeah.
It takes time. I mean, I worked out with Craig for 3 months over the summer and I saw some change. And then I didn't work out with Craig for a month when I traveled and I saw plenty of negative change, right? And that's when I came back to you. I was like, I got to come back. I need Craig to program for me, which he does. And so now it's been four months since I've been following Craig again on the program and my body is changing. Like I see it.
Good.
So all of that stuff were my big lessons.
I think the thing that jumped out at me was you use the term surrendering. And I experienced, obviously I chat to a lot of executives and business owners, right? There's a real kind of fear around being vulnerable. And potentially you see this in your space, but I think even more so with what we do, us as a company, because you're kind of, when you maybe approach the boss or the person that owns it, and as you say, they're a smart person, you didn't get there because you're stupid, right? You're there because you're smart and you're persistent and you kind of you move things forward, right? You're a doer. So what I find is that, the way that you approach that type of person is really important because they don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to admit most of the time that they can't work it out themselves. So what we find often is people come to us when the problem's like hitting them in the face. So either the doctors said, hey, listen, you need to lose weight because you're on all these medications, you've got this potential outcome which is becoming more and more of an issue, or heaven forbid, some people we chat to, they've had an event which has been a bad thing, whether it's a fall, whether it's, a stroke, could be anything. But generally speaking, most of those type of people need the smack around the face of a thing to happen. There's a smaller group which become more proactive when they kind of hit things like 50th birthday, an event like that, or it can be, their grandkid pushed their belly and said, Granddad, Grandma, you've got to sort yourself out. So I think because we've got that experience with working that type of people and the way that you said, surrendering, I think that's such an important part of this because, even when we do start to help people, there's an apprehension around trusting the process because they're so used to playing the chess game and knowing every single piece and what's happening. It's only really when they start to understand, look, just follow the process and it'll all be okay. And eventually after maybe a week or two, they start to go, okay, right, I'm going to just leave this to you guys now. That's when it starts working. Is that the kind of thing you're alluding to?
What was coming up to me is something that what's coming up for me is our bodies have got to be one of the most complex systems in the universe. Or maybe not the universe, maybe on the earth, right? We're pretty complex. And so much stuff that you read on the internet tries to simplify our bodies, right? Calories in, or calories in minus calories out. Like, it's ridiculous. Because if that worked, every one of us could objectively figure it out, right? So I think the misnomer or the myth is, well, I'm smart enough, I'll just go online and figure it out. But all you're figuring out are the basics. Like you could do math, sure, but how is the calculus different from my system than your system? And I think that's the rub. I think a lot of people think that it's common sense. There's enough information on the internet. I'll read some books. I'll do this, whatever, Status Slim or the South Beach diet or paleo or fill in the blank. And that in and of itself is going to work. And for some people, I'm sure it does. Right. So I think part of maybe what I'm hearing from you is if that's you, great, go do it. And when it doesn't work for you, that's when you're my client. right? And that was me. I had tried enough things that didn't work, and I was like, I can't figure it out. I'm not. So one last thing is there's a reactive and a proactive aspect, right? The reactive is, I'm 50 pounds overweight and I got, heart issues, and my doctor's telling me you got to lose some fat, right? I don't know if I was reactive or proactive. Maybe I was in the middle, right? But there was no immediate driver other than like, I'm tired. It's frustrating me. I'm talking to myself a lot. I'm angry a lot about this topic. I don't know enough. I need help. Yeah. So that's where I got to, and what led me to you.
Yeah, 100%. And you get different types of characters. I mean, we've had, clients in the past that have been watching our content for months and months and months. Just message saying, "Hey, I've been watching you for ages. Let's get this going," and then just kind of have a chat, get signed up, sorted. Then you get the guys that have kind of got to have, undeniable evidence that this works. They've got to have a friend that's done it. They've got to have there's different horses for courses, we call it. There's all different types of people, right? But I think, and again, I'm kind of promoting a bit now because we've started to talk about what we do. I think where we sit as a company, we don't kind of advertise to everybody. We work specifically with people that, business leaders generally, but people that have kind of tried loads of stuff and they've actually worked out, I don't have any time at all. I literally don't have any time. No one really gets how little time I have because I travel all the time. I'm always eating out. What little free time I do have, I need to spend it with my kids, my grandkids, and my partner. So the likelihood of me sitting on YouTube for 14 hours, digesting stuff that maybe won't even work for me, then going away for 6 months and testing and trialing it, then getting frustrated and annoyed that I've not lost any weight or got healthy. That's the kind of person we work with and go, do you know what? Just get rid of all that, save yourself all the time and frustration, and just get something that works. And that's kind of what we do. And when you spoke about, we could talk about calories in, calories out till the cows come home. But I think our industry is riddled with people that, want to make it as simple as physically possible and just say it's an energy thing. But as you say, the human body is a little bit more complicated than that. And if you just want to drop a few pounds, probably do the job for you. But if you're looking to become healthier, stronger, more resilient, have better sleep, better libido, better long-term outcomes, it's a bit more complicated than just eating less Mars bars. And that's the kind of where we sit in, right? So what I want to do quickly, Darren, because, we had a good go today. So thanks for your time, man. Just quickly, could you tell us where people can check you out, where the best place is to kind of learn a bit more about what you do and how people can reach out to you? That'd be great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Interestingly and luckily enough for me, I'm the only Darren Kanthal on LinkedIn.
The only one, really?
Truly.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if it's fair to say the world because I can't verify that, but my grandparents independently, they didn't know each other in Germany, but they escaped Germany during World War II. When they arrived to the United States, they were my grandfather was the only Kanthal clan that made it, as far as I know. So him and my great uncle formed the Kanthals of the United States. And so I'm the only Darren Kanthal on LinkedIn. So I'm easy to find. Wow. So that's one. Two is my company is the Kanthal Group, and that's the website. So I'm sure my name will be somewhere in the writing, so the spelling will be there. Yep. And hopefully that's easy enough to find me. And
I know you post a lot on LinkedIn, so people can check your content out. I know you do the videos, stuff like that. So what we'll do when we post this up, we'll put a link under there anyway. But as you can see, Darren's chatty and open, and just like we are as a company. So anyone that's interested in what Darren does, just reach out. But Darren, thank you for your time, mate. Appreciate you being open and honest and chatting about those things. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Cam.